You know,
I've been around for a while.
I've met some interesting people. Done some crazy things. You'd think that there wasn't much that could take me by surprise. You'd be wrong. The world is full of stories and science and things that amaze and confound me every single day. Incredible mysteries that keep me awake at night. Some I can answer, and others just defy logic.
Can we suddenly disappear without a trace? 3 men vanished from a yacht off the coast of Australia.
There was no trace of blood, there was no damage to the ship.
Were they abducted by undersea aliens? In Vermont, almost a dozen people disappeared from a remote mountain wood.
All they ever found was a few empty bullet shells.
Were they attacked by a Sasquatch? And in Tasmania, a pilot is chased by an unknown craft before disappearing.
Could possibly say it was murder.
Was he shot down by a UFO?
Yeah, it's a weird world, and I love it. The Mary Celeste, magnificent, isn't she? This 280-ton brigantine was found fully seaworthy and floating unmanned in the Atlantic in 1872. Abandoned by her entire crew and passengers. All their belongings and 6 months' supplies were still on board, untouched. What happened to them? Throughout history, tales of vanishings have mystified and baffled us. Can people simply disappear from the face of the earth? This extraordinary story is regarded as the greatest maritime mystery of all time. Or it was. Until 2007.
April 14th, 2007. 3 men set out on a cruise off the eastern coast of Australia. For Des Batten and brothers Peter and Jim Tunstead, it's the adventure of a lifetime. A 5,000-kilometer, 8-week voyage that will take them past some of the most spectacular coastline in the world. Judy Sharp is a Queensland attorney.
It was a journey that was in the planning for some considerable period. The 3 men each undertook various courses, including first aid.
Des, the owner of Cas 2, is an experienced amateur sailor who's made several trips in the area.
Des Batten had a long-standing interest in boating and had owned a number of vessels in the past, including a 40-foot cruising vessel. Jim Tunstead had significant experience in sailing smaller sailing boats. He had competed in 14-foot skiff racing regularly in the past.
It will be the longest journey any of them has attempted.
The purpose of the journey was to transport the Cas 2 from Airlie Beach back to Western Australia where the Battens lived. The voyage was ambitious, to say the least.
The 3 men set out from Able Point Marina on a beautiful Sunday morning.
People who saw the men before they set off on the journey on that morning described them as being in good spirits.
Jim decides to capture the moment for posterity.
The last record of them is some video footage that was taken on board the Cas 2. We think at about 10:05 a.m, so a couple of hours into the voyage.
Clouds ahead.
Peter Tunstead was fishing off the back of the boat, and Des Batten was at the helm. Everything was normal.
In their final contact with the outside world, Des checks in with a radio operator on shore, a routine precaution.
A local marine rescue volunteer had radio contact with the men.
But the yacht fails to show up at its next anchorage on Cape Gloucester. And calls to Jim Tunstead's cell phone go unanswered. 3 days later, the Cas 2 is spotted by the Australian Coast Guard, miles off course and drifting aimlessly. Photojournalist Cameron Laird is one of the first to reach the missing yacht.
The ship was abandoned and it was just floating adrift in the ocean. Its sails just blowing wildly in the breeze, and you could tell clearly that something was wrong. When the search and rescue found the boat, they lowered crewmen who went in and checked to see if there were anyone on board.
Rescuers find no sign of the crew. But even more alarming, they find evidence that whatever took place on board must have taken them by surprise.
Keys were still in the ignition of the boat. The maps were still laid out on the table. Sugar and tea bags were still in the kitchen. Fishing lines were still on board. There was a laptop still running at the time. There were still life jackets on board. The orange fluorescent life ring was still on board. The safety buoys were still attached to the boat. Everything looked fine. It just looked like that someone had driven the boat into port and parked.
Mysteriously, the only thing that's out of place is an ordinary piece of fishing line.
There was fishing line and a lure tangled around the portside rudder, and that was where Peter Tunstead was seen to be fishing.
The authorities launch a massive search and rescue operation by air and sea.
They sent search and rescue helicopters and fixed-wing planes. I think also maybe the Army were involved with some Army aircraft as well.
The Cas-2 is towed into port where the police and forensic teams comb the vessel for clues.
There was no trace of blood, there was no damage to the ship, there was no broken glasses or anything in the cabin. Nothing untoward had happened.
The three men were never found. To this day, the case of the Cas-2 remains one of Australia's most enduring, unsolved mysteries.
Nobody really knew whether the men were dead or alive, and they had disappeared in such mysterious circumstances. Nothing could explain the fate of the men.
Sadly, that should really never have happened.
You know, I love the ocean. Boats are my passion. Wind in your hair, the smell of the sea, makes me feel alive. But I gotta tell you, this story is weird or what? I mean, we all know that sailors have to have respect for the sea, right? But here they are on a perfect day, on a perfect boat. What were they doing? I mean, let's face it, what could possibly go wrong? Almost anything.
What happened to the men on board the Cas-2? Cryptozoologist Adam McGurr thinks it was something monstrous, a giant squid.
We now know that these animals live in our oceans and went virtually undetected, aside from legends and stories from sailors saying that they encountered or were attacked by a large squid-like animal.
McGurr says the giant squid has gone from legend to reality as scientists have studied the elusive creature up close.
In 2007, fishermen off the southern tip of New Zealand actually captured the largest recorded specimen of a colossal squid, and it measured 33 feet long from the tip of its head to the end of its tentacles, and it was estimated to weigh about 1,100 pounds.
But could a giant squid account for the loss of the Cas-2's crew? McGurr says the animals have attacked small boats before, especially in the warm waters of the Pacific.
In 2003, there were a couple of French sailors attempting to circumnavigate the globe. All of a sudden, they lost control of their boat. And on the rear of the ship, they found a gargantuan squid wrapped around the rudder, making it so that they couldn't turn or control the boat in any way. After some time, when they stopped the ship, the squid released its grasp and went down to the depths, and they were able to continue on their way. But this is a perfect example of a very close encounter with a giant squid.
Although the creatures aren't aggressive, they are inquisitive and constantly on the lookout for a meal.
A colossal squid may look up at the surface and see the bottom of a boat and interpret that as a large fish that it might like to go after, or possibly even a whale. And throughout history, several whale carcasses have been found with extremely large sucker marks on their skin, indicating that they have either gone after the squid to eat them or been locked in some type of struggle or battle with the squid. So I think mostly a squid would come up to the surface out of either curiosity or necessity because it's chasing prey. And if it were to encounter a small boat, it would try and explore that boat using its arms and tentacles.
McGurr thinks if one of the creatures did intercept the yacht, it was quite capable of sweeping the crew overboard.
A colossal squid actually has very sharp, serrated edges on its suction cups in order to grab a hold of prey and prevent them from escaping. You're basically at the mercy of the squid at that point.
Did a giant squid attack the cast tube? Or does the key to the mystery lie even deeper?
There are extraterrestrial beings who have encounters in the ocean.
3 men disappear from a yacht off the coast of Australia. Were they attacked by a giant squid? Psychotherapist Barbara Lamb agrees that what caused the cast tube tragedy came from the ocean depths. But it's weirder than any sea monster.
There's no doubt in my mind that there are extraterrestrial beings who do have encounters in the ocean with many human beings.
Lamb is convinced not only is the cast tube crew still alive, they are being held captive by aliens using stealthy underwater vehicles.
A USO is an undersea or an unidentified sea object. We do feel convinced that there are these USOs as well as UFOs, unidentified flying objects.
Lamb learned about USOs from a surprising source, her own patients. She got them to reveal buried memories of alien sightings through a controversial technique called regression therapy.
Okay, does there seem to be any presence of anyone in addition to the light? Regression is a form of hypnosis where a person comes in with a particular concern, maybe an event, to find out the details that he or she does not remember consciously. So the process is that I conduct a nice 10 or 15 minutes worth of deep relaxation suggestions, and the person does become very nice and deeply relaxed. And during that process of the relaxation, I suggest that the person is going to go back to whatever that issue is or that event that they want to know more of the details about. So when we get into a fully relaxed state, then I just ask questions about, what are you aware of? What are you seeing? What are you feeling? What are you experiencing in any way? And the person in this very relaxed state is now having images and awarenesses of details from that experience. In the case of regressing somebody to what we think might have been an extraterrestrial encounter, we go back to the first little glimpse or hints that something unusual might be happening. This could be something that happened last week, or last month, last year, last decade, even 30 or 40 years earlier, if that's what the person wants to discover more about. So I give the suggestion that they go back to those first few moments of awareness. I would say maybe 1/4 of the people who come to me have had extraterrestrial encounters. Do you hear a voice as this is happening? Or how is it?
No, he's talking to me through my mind.
Over the years, her patients gave such detailed accounts of USOs, Lamb had to accept they were real.
One client who lives right close to the Southern California coast has many times seen a disc-shaped craft shooting up from under the ocean. This craft kind of docked with or attached to a building that seemed to be down on the floor of the ocean.
Some of the stories had chilling similarities with the Cast 2 incident.
I know one man who lost his entire family that was on a huge yacht. They sailed from Bermuda in the 1950s. About 10 different people on it disappeared. Nothing was ever found, no life ring, nothing.
Did undersea aliens kidnap the Cas-2 sailors? Or is the solution more urgent? Police Constable Patrick McLeod works in the Marine Unit of the Toronto Police Service.
The ghost ship scenario isn't as rare as people think. We find vessels all the time that are abandoned.
McLeod is confident the disappearance of the Cas-2 crew is no more than a tragic accident.
I think what happened to these fellows on the Cas-2 was simply a man overboard disaster.
How can he be so sure? McLeod points to a single clue found by rescuers: a tangled fishing line.
Looks like one of the guys was fishing and his lure got tied up on the back of the rudder. He might have been down there trying to free it, fell overboard. His brother jumps in to save him, and the other fellow might have been in a panic.
What began as a simple mishap quickly spiraled out of control, with Des trying desperately to rescue his friend.
Tried to come back to save them, and during the rescue fell overboard himself. Once they're off the vessel, there's virtually no chance of them getting back on. The Cas-2 catamaran, even at its slowest speed, would be uncatchable by the best swimmer in the world.
Did the crew of the Cas-2 drown because they couldn't catch up to their boat? Constable McLeod is going to test his theory by staging an experiment.
Ready? Up.
Today we're here in a controlled situation to see if a swimmer falling off the back of a boat can actually swim to catch up with it when it's going approximately 12 kilometers an hour.
An inflatable dinghy will be towed at the same speed as the Cas-2. A trained police swimmer will play the role of the sailors.
Derek, you're going to fall overboard like something's happened, but try to get back to that dinghy as fast as you can and see if you can get on board. Okay, let's go, guys.
Constable McLeod will measure the dinghy's speed with a radar gun.
3, 2, 1, pull!
They get the dinghy moving at 4 kilometers an hour, less than half the Cas-2 speed. But even at this reduced velocity, Derek simply can't.
Even in a controlled situation in a pool with a very fit person, a very young person, a trained person, that he was still unable to catch that dinghy at a much slower speed than we thought the Cas-2 was going. There's no way that these older gentlemen are going to be able to catch that vessel. They're basically doomed.
Were the men on board of the Cas-2 snatched by a sea monster? Were they abducted by undersea aliens? Or did they simply fall overboard in a tragic accident? Weird. Almost a dozen people vanished from a remote mountain forest.
All that was left behind was empty bullet shells.
You know, these days, modern technology has made hiking through the forest easy. You've got a GPS in case you get lost.
Go straight ahead.
Digital compass tells you what direction you're headed in.
North.
Shockproof watch, hunting knife, safety vest for visibility. They make stuff to protect you from just about any situation. But there's one thing that nothing will save you from, and that's a forest that swallows you whole.
Bennington, Vermont is a historic town set against the breathtaking scenery of Green Mountain National Forest. But it also borders on an area Native Americans have avoided for hundreds of years, believing it to be inhabited by dark and vengeful spirits. Glastonbury Mountain. Joe Derwin is a local journalist and folklorist.
Glastonbury Mountain comes across as a creepy place. It's high and dark and remote and heavily wooded, and there's a ghost town. There is sort of this old New England aura of haunted houses and dark forests and mysterious secrets.
One of the region's most puzzling mysteries is that of James Tedford. On December 1st, 1949, James is making his way home after visiting relatives.
Tedford was a veteran who lived in Bennington.
He had taken this bus countless times. But tonight, he attracts more attention than normal.
There was a sighting of James Tedford in St. Albans, Vermont. He was seen by a friend there during a stop.
But when the bus pulls into Bennington, all is not well. James isn't there.
He was seen on a bus by 14 witnesses at one stop, and then by the next stop, he was mysteriously gone, and all that was left behind was his luggage.
Police are called in to investigate, but no trace of the man is ever found.
We don't know what happened to him after that.
But James's disappearance isn't the only unsolved missing persons case in the Bennington area. Exactly 3 years earlier, Paula Weldon was hiking the Long Trail, one of Bennington's most famous tourist attractions.
Paula Weldon was an attractive 18-year-old student at Bennington College. She left the campus on December 1st, and she went walking up the Long Trail towards the top of Glastonbury Mountain.
Despite the cold, Paula isn't alone in the forest. Other hikers see her as she disappears around a bend. They think nothing of it until they too round the corner. Paula is nowhere to be seen.
She was seen by several people on the way, and then at some point, she simply disappeared.
Police and the FBI mount one of the biggest manhunts in Vermont history.
It was probably the most extensive of any of the searches. It was one of the first times helicopters were used over the area to look for someone.
Paula is never heard from again. Even more puzzling is what happens to Mitty Rivers, a local guide and outdoorsman.
Mitty Rivers is a guy in his 60s, very experienced in the woods. He was hunting with his son-in-law. He went into an area called Hell Hollow, which he knew quite well, and he went off by himself for a little while, and he was never seen again.
Mitty has vanished, almost within earshot of his companion.
When his relatives went to look for him, he was nowhere to be found, and they searched for days. There was massive manhunts, and all they ever found was a few of his empty bullet shells on a trail.
These and 5 other mysterious disappearances between 1945 and 1950 lead the area to be christened the Bennington Triangle.
The legend of the Bennington Triangle is this apex of weirdness and mystery, sort of a almost Bermuda-like triangle, but on land.
Then in May 1951, a potential breakthrough. The police come across something they've never seen before in the Bennington Triangle cases, a body. It belongs to a hiker who disappeared the previous autumn.
Of the disappearances in the Bennington Triangle that I've heard of, only one really stands out as being resolved, partially at least, in terms of a body being found, and that's a woman from Massachusetts named Frida Langer.
The autopsy doesn't reveal how she died, and even more perplexing, she's found in an area that has been searched previously. Police now wonder if a serial killer is on the loose, abducting his victims both on foot and in vehicles. The public dubs him the Bennington Ripper.
Usually with serial killers, you see a lot of conformity in the types of victims. With these disappearances, you don't see that. You don't see similarities in age, gender, background, clothing, anything.
The theory is discarded for lack of evidence.
In the end, all we know for sure is that they were not found.
Who or what is responsible for the victims of the Bennington Triangle? Can people simply vanish off the face of the earth? Author Christopher Noel isn't so sure.
There is a strong possibility that these disappearances could be related to Sasquatches or one Sasquatch in the area, given that there have been many sightings of these creatures over the years in the Bennington area.
The Sasquatch, also known as Bigfoot, is a legendary ape-like creature thought to inhabit the forests of North America. Noel has been studying them for years.
A Sasquatch could easily snatch us off a trail. It could snatch more than one of us if it wanted to. It's quite possible that there was a rogue Sasquatch, probably a male, who was operating outside the normal range of Sasquatch behavior.
He points to an incident that took place only 20 years before the first Bennington Triangle case.
A man named Albert Ostman was taken from his campsite and carried to a small box canyon where he was held captive for 6 days.
The victim not only survived, he escaped to tell the tale. The world's earliest documented Bigfoot abduction.
He described what it looked like, how they behaved, in very exquisite detail that hadn't been known at the time and has been confirmed over and over and over by sightings down through the years. There's just been too many reports of intimidation behavior and sightings of Sasquatch here in the Bennington area to discount this possibility, especially around Glastonbury Mountain. I spoke with a man last year who had been in a hunting trailer on Glastonbury Mountain, and he and his buddies had woken up in the middle of the night when the trailer was shaken violently. And nothing else is going to be shaking a trailer like that. They opened the door and they saw something in the dark, but they could see it running away on 2 legs. It would just be absurd to rule out this possibility without looking into it more deeply, especially considering the context of sightings and intimidation behavior that we have here in the historical record.
Did Bigfoot abduct the Bennington Triangle victims? If so, why was only one body ever found?
I'm sure that these creatures, if they abducted these people, took them far away from where people ever go, into the thick, thick parts of the woods, high up, in caves, and we just never would happen to cross them.
See, I don't think this is fair. Something weird happens and boom, poor old Sasquatch takes the rap. Again, did he kidnap the victims? I don't think so. And here's why. Bigfoot is described in reports as a hairy, ape-like creature, 10 feet tall, over 500 pounds, with large eyes, a pronounced brow, and low-set forehead covered in dark red hair. The enormous footprints for which it is known are 24 inches long and 8 inches wide, and get this, the creature is commonly reported to have a strong, unpleasant smell by those who claim to have encountered it. Now, I have one question. How on earth could a doofus like that take anyone by surprise?
Is Bigfoot to blame for the Vermont vanishings? Or was it another kind of killer?
When they're hungry, food is food.
8 people vanished from the Bennington Triangle in Vermont. Were they kidnapped by Bigfoot? Bennington hunting and fishing guide George Prouty says no.
I think the only animal in this area that would attack and kill a human would be a mountain lion. We know there's big cats up here. When the food population is low and they're hungry, food is food.
Prouty has no doubt the animals have what it takes to take down a fully grown man.
A mountain lion is a big cat. They're very protective of their game. What they kill, they usually cart away. Even my size, a 200-pound person, a cat like that can drag and actually carry up a tree, put on a limb and take their time to devour it. And after a period of time, you'd think even the clothing would be visible. Yet a denning animal, an animal that goes into a cave or a den, which a mountain lion that has young, that's where they're going to be. They're not going to be up in a tree somewhere. The clothing is all hidden. It's all gone. Once the food is gone and the clothing is there, there's no way to recover it. It's in a cat den, or it's in a place where it's not recoverable.
Prouty says details of the vanishings match the way big cats stalk their prey.
It's always been a single person, and when a mountain lion goes on attack, that's their ultimate goal, is to get one individual singled out from the crowd, then that's the one they're going to choose to attack.
Did a mountain lion devour the victims of the Bennington Triangle? How does this explain James Tedford vanishing from a movie bus? Astrophysics author Morris Franks thinks the missing people fell victim to an exotic phenomenon of modern science. A wormhole.
The wormhole is a tunnel between 2 points in space and time, where if something went in one end of the wormhole, it would come out instantly at the other end, no matter how far away that other end may be. In other words, not limited by the Einstein's limit on the speed of light, 186,284 miles per second, as the speed of travel, but instantaneous communication. Wormholes unquestionably exist at the subatomic level. There's no question about that. And apparently there is no limit to the size to which a wormhole can be made.
Could a human stumble into a wormhole? Frank says it's happened before to none other than the U.S. military.
In 1943, the United States Navy wanted a technology to make battleships disappear from enemy radar. And they commissioned Albert Einstein and Nikola Tesla to work on the project. It was called the Philadelphia experiment. Now, all this is shrouded in secrecy. And some weird things happened, including the U.S. Eldridge disappeared spontaneously from Philadelphia Harbor and showed up in Norfolk, Virginia, hundreds of miles away. The only explanation I can think of, if that happened, would be a large wormhole. Now, experts on wormholes, such as Kip Thorne and David Deutsch, would tell you it takes too much energy to open up that big a wormhole. It's theoretically possible, but it's not likely because of the energy requirements to open up that big a wormhole. But on the other hand, they did have a megawatt generator on the USS Eldridge powering the electronic equipment that Tesla designed. And apparently they were able to do something. And the only explanation you can find in quantum physics is the wormhole.
Did the U.S. government create wormholes to hide battleships? Was the same technology used on the victims in Vermont?
If the people who went missing in the Bennington, Vermont area were sucked into a wormhole, I have no idea where they came out. It could be anywhere on this planet, it could be anywhere in another galaxy.
Were the Bennington Triangle victims snatched by Sasquatch? Were they killed by a mountain lion? Or were they pulled into an intergalactic wormhole? Weird, or what? A pilot is chased by a UFO before he vanishes without trace.
He says it's not an aircraft.
Last year, there were 900,000 missing persons recorded in North America. That's nearly 2,500 people who vanish every day. It's a scary thought, isn't it? I mean, the good news is most of these cases are easily explained. Kids running away from home, husbands running away from wives, or the IRS. But there's one case that doesn't fit into any category, and that's because it happened in mid-air.
October 21st, 1978. A Cessna 182 takes off from Melbourne's Moorabbin Airport. At the controls is Frederick Valentine, a 20-year-old flying instructor with the Australian Air Training Corps. His story has been documented by author Reg Watson.
He had a passion for flying. And because of this, he'd already knocked up 150 flying hours. He wanted to become a commercial pilot.
Frederick is bound for King Island, a short flight across the Bass Strait that separates mainland Australia from Tasmania.
Bass Strait is the most fascinating place. There has been a number of underground earthquakes there. So it is a very dangerous area, volatile area, and many boats, if you like, mysteriously go missing. Valentine had planned to leave Moorabbin Airport to go to King Island to meet some friends there. Visibility was good. It was excellent flying weather.
It's little more than an hour's flight time to King Island Airport. So far, it's been going smoothly.
It was only going about 120 miles per hour. Full tank. It had been well looked after. There was no problem with the craft itself. It should have got to King Island without any problem.
But 47 minutes into the journey, Frederick notices another, much larger aircraft flying at the same altitude.
Valentine was travelling about 4,500 feet in elevation. And the question that he asked Moorabbin, are there any aircraft below 5,000?
Delta Sierra Juliet. There seems to be a large aircraft below 5,000.
Manning the radio at Moorabbin Airport is air traffic controller Steve Roby. He checks the board. There's nothing else in the area. Suddenly, the other aircraft makes several high-speed passes above and below his much smaller Cessna.
It seems to me that he's playing some sort of game.
He's saying it's travelling under me. Within a short period of time, he's saying it's 1,000 feet above me. Then he says it's coming towards me. He asked the amazing question. He said, are there any Air Force craft in the area? Moorabbin said no.
The craft then veers close enough for Frederick to get a good look at it.
He said, well, it's long, shiny like metal.
It's got a green light and sort of metallic. It's all shiny on the outside.
Obviously, he's not familiar with it.
Suddenly, Frederick's engine begins to sputter and his controls malfunction.
The engine is rough idling.
But now the strange craft is performing even more frightening maneuvers around Frederick's plane.
It's travelling at incredible speeds. He said it's vanishing. It's orbiting me now.
Robbie asked the young pilot to repeat his description of the unidentified aircraft. Frederick's answer is choking.
That strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It is hovering, and it's not an aircraft.
He says it's not an aircraft, and then it goes off.
It's Frederick's last transmission. Robbie desperately tries to re-establish contact, but all he hears is a metallic clicking noise that ends with radio silence.
It was presumed that Frederick had smashed into the sea, and as a consequence, a search was arranged.
Frederick's Cessna is equipped with a radio beacon. It should be easy to locate. But as rescuers search, the mystery only deepens.
No wreckage, no body, and no oil spill was ever found.
Over 3 decades later, Reg Watson is convinced the Australian government still needs to get to the bottom of the case.
What I'd like to see happen with Frederick Valentik is that the authorities admit that something peculiar happened. I get angry with the authorities. I really would like that some type of salvage operation would go off the coast of Victoria to see whether indeed his aircraft is still there.
Now, if ever there was a genuine mystery, this is it, and here's why. It couldn't have been an accident. You see, your chances of being involved in an air crash are about 1 in 11 million. You got far more chance of being killed by a bee sting. Or choking on food. Or climbing a ladder. Or falling out of bed. Get it?
What happened to Frederick Valentik? What did he see before he disappeared? Victor Vigiani is a paranormal investigator who studied the incident. He makes the case that Frederick was attacked by the only vehicle capable of the maneuvers he described, an alien spaceship.
One of the things that we know for sure is that this craft did circular things around his craft. So it would hover below, it would hover above, beside, and he was sort of looking all over the place and watching this thing come and go and dart. Normal aircraft can't do that.
Vigiano says Frederick wasn't the only person to see the UFO that was harassing him. It was also visible to witnesses on land.
There was a family of 3 or 4, 2 adults and 1 or 2 children who were driving along the road and actually saw the Valanche's craft moving along over the ocean and the UFO above it.
The UFO's technology was so powerful, it was able to cripple the Cessna's engine and instruments.
The electromagnetic influences that are part of the UFO phenomenon are manifested in the avionics. There were many instances where pilots have seen their instrumentations go just completely wild or be shut down completely. In Montana, back in 1967, a series of nuclear missiles, there was a nuclear missile installation, and about 12 to 15 of these missiles were in silos at what they called Oscar flight. And below the surface of the ground, in the bunkers, the launch commanders reside. They watch everything going on. And what happened was, Captain Robert Salas, who was the launch commander at the time at Echo Flight, got a call from one of his guards up on top and saying there's UFOs just flying all over the place, coming and going here. We don't know what the heck's going on. And so Captain Salas said, listen, just stay cool, don't get carried away. They had their weapons drawn, ready to do whatever, and he hung the phone fine. And then a few minutes later, the same guard calls back, and he's completely frenetic. This man is just right off the wire. He's off the dial. He's excited. He's can barely speak, and he says there's this huge glowing red object right outside the gate, huge, massive, and we don't know what the heck it is. And then Captain Salas, monitoring all of these things, listening to the men talk up above, then the guard says the thing is just taken off, it's just gone. And as soon as the UFO retreated or left the scene, 12 of his missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, were shut down, put into a no-go situation. They were unlaunchable. They went down one at a time. This is something that Captain Robert Salas has to this day said has never happened before, at least to his witnessing.
Why wasn't there any wreckage? Simple. The plane didn't crash.
My personal opinion is that craft in some way was taken onto the UFO.
Vigiani is sure the authorities know it and have covered it up.
The general public has been conditioned to do is seek out those other explanations. Not just the human mind seeking rational arguments. The cover-up has also very psychologically conditioned us to go for the rational argument. Well, it's only this. Well, it's just a weather phenomenon. Well, it's just a flock of birds.
Was the Cessna taken on board by a UFO? Or did Frederick conceal his true intentions?
This is somebody that actually planned his disappearance.
A pilot disappears off the Australian coast after an encounter with an unknown craft. Was he abducted by a UFO? New York City-based private investigator Steve Rambo doesn't buy it.
As much as I'd like to believe in intelligent life somewhere in the universe, because it's lacking in most of the places where I work, I really don't subscribe to the UFO theory.
Rambam specializes in tracking down people who fake their own deaths.
If you look at this case, even superficially, you'll see that this is somebody that actually planned his disappearance.
Frederick had his whole life ahead of him. Why would he want to disappear?
20 years old, he's first experiencing the stresses of adulthood. He's entering the job market. He's starting to wonder what he's going to do with his life. He has a young girlfriend who is putting pressure on him about the future. After he disappeared, she showed a lot of signs of instability. She didn't work or essentially go out for about 7 years. I can tell you, when I was a 19-year-old guy, there were a couple of times when I wished I had a plane I could get into and go away from my college tests and my girlfriend at the time and whatever. I've got to tell you, there are people of that age with less pressure on them who don't have a plane available to them who manage to get up and fly away.
How does this explain the UFO attack? Random thinks Frederick made it up.
For the couple of weeks before he disappeared, he expressed unusual sudden interest in UFOs. It's a little difficult for me to believe that this fella all of a sudden gets sucked up into the mothership.
But if Frederick was a faker, why did he do it? To escape.
He has a plane at his disposal, which he has gassed up for 300 miles flight. Even though he's only got to go 40 miles, he probably needed some getting away money. And that plane was worth something. I think that plane was either sold or sold for parts. Everything was easier in 1978. Life was easier. Today, if you disappear, I know everywhere you've been up to the nanosecond before that disappearance. I know your credit card usage. I know your Wi-Fi activity. I know your cell phone within 100 feet. I know who you spoke to, who you emailed. I know your friends, your family, your likes, your dislikes, all in a database. I can tell you that now, I've been doing this for about 30 years. And I can tell you that in 1981 and 82, when I backgrounded somebody, my initial intake file, if I was really, really lucky, was about 20 pages. That was a huge file. Today, if I background you and I do initial intake on somebody who's disappeared, if I have less than 500 pages, it's a shame.
Rambam thinks we can solve the mystery. All we have to do is look in the right place.
If I had to bet, I think he's flying planes somewhere. Certainly not under his own name, but there's somebody that looks quite like him with his background. I've worked with police in Australia. They're no dummies. I think they've kept this open because they know darn well this kid was not sucked up into a UFO.
Did Frederick Valentin fake his own death? Or does the answer lie elsewhere? Mark Wallace has been a commercial airline pilot for almost 30 years.
I've actually narrowed it down to one theory as to what's happened. If you're a brand new pilot, this is one of the more common problems that leads to crashes. They get disoriented.
Wallace thinks Frederick's big mistake was the time he departed, 6:20 p.m.
When you're a fairly new pilot, that's called visual flight rules. You're looking at the sky for reference to keep yourself right side up. As you get late in the day, the water looks black at night. You now have a black ocean morphing into a black sky. You're losing that defining horizon for pilots to look at.
As it grows darker, Frederick grows more disoriented.
You can't really see the horizon anymore. It's very easy then for the airplane to start to go into a bank and you don't feel it. If you're an inexperienced pilot and you can't feel the plane banking and you look down at this instrument and it shows the airplane in a 30-degree bank, you don't believe it. So you don't change.
The more the plane banked, the more it lost altitude until the Cessna simply fell into the sea. But why didn't searchers find any wreckage?
The Bass Strait is a massive strait of water between Australia and Tasmania, and it's got a lot of ocean currents as the ocean whips down from the Great Barrier Reef. Even though it's not very deep, it wouldn't take much for that, whatever debris there is, to end up who knows where.
But what about the mysterious craft that harassed him?
My first thought was that it's some sort of a military aircraft. You know, someone's fooling around, having a little bit of fun with the guy. I wouldn't put it past the military guys to go out and basically do an intercept, you know, a practice intercept on an aircraft.
Did Frederick Valentin crash his plane into the ocean? Or did he fake his own death? Was he shot down by an alien spacecraft? We may never know. Weird, or what? So there we have it. 3 stories of unsolved vanishings. 3 men disappeared from aboard a yacht in Australia. Were they attacked by a giant squid? A series of people vanished from a remote Vermont forest. Did Bigfoot kidnap them? And a pilot was chased by a strange, unidentified craft. Was he shot down by aliens? You decide.
Join me next time for more stories that will undoubtedly be weird, or what?